We have learned that with this program, you could probably do any topic on Nico, and it's going to get a lot of views. We're not doing that just for the sake of getting more views. What we want to do now is look at a situation where I think the NCAA just illustrated how incredibly out of touch it was, Caleb, as they were prepared to sit Nico down for something that was not even determined a violation once Tennessee's and Virginia's court case was settled. That's how far they were from understanding what is even going on with this thing.
Yeah, so apparently this thing went way back because the NCAA reportedly has been trying to shut down Spire Sports. And so Tennessee knew the NCAA was coming after it before Iamaleava even began his true freshman season in 2023. They had set their sights on the relationship between Spire Sports and the between Iamaleava and Spire Sports, which for those who don't remember, that's the Tennessee affiliated NIL collective. And Nico Iamaleava was really their, as CBS Sports reports, their crown jewel was what they said of the agency. And this came and on the heels of the failed Jaden Rashada deal, the NCAA decided to go after Tennessee and Florida State. They expected, according to this report, that Tennessee was going to cooperate easily because they had just gotten off of the previous scandal that Jeremy Pruitt oversaw. And so they expected that a wounded Tennessee was going to cooperate. And according to this report, they tried, and their initial plan to flex their muscles was to rule Iamaleava ineligible and force Tennessee to disassociate itself with Spire Sports, according to Tom Mars, who represents Spire Sports. And this was a way for them to try kind of it confirms kind of what we thought at the time, which was that the NCAA wanted to flex their muscles, but it also took it a step further in the sense of they wanted to go so far as to say that this year, with all the hype behind Iamaleava, the NCAA was going to step in and say he can't play this year.
Yeah, this sounds like an all or nothing situation. You remember we got a bit startled when the state of Tennessee and Virginia decided to enter against this lawsuit against the NCAA. Why they just hopped up and did it real quick in a couple of days, Caleb. But I think this is the reason. I think that they went to Tennessee and they said, our goal here is for you to eventually have to disassociate yourself with Nico Iamaleava. And they weren't going to go for that. So that's why they had to go all in and file the lawsuit.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and maybe I don't know what your thoughts, but obviously the state filed the lawsuit, but my guess is the university was already working with state officials and had this ready to go.
Oh, yeah.
They were prepared for this to happen. But the crazy part is that I'm not trying to, like morally grandstand or anything, but it's very clear that the NCAA had no qualms about putting a young freshman, putting his career on hold and jeopardizing his career to flex their own muscles against the school.
That's just emblematic of what they've been their entire existence.
Yeah.
It's to hurt amateur athletes, excuse me, as I have the hiccups. It's to hurt amateur athletes and line their own pockets. That's their goal. Please hit the like and subscribe button if you agree. Also, our poll question, Caleb, is?
Our poll question is pulling it up now. Sorry, guys, a little bit slow on the uptake. I got to get better at this. Is this all you hope for in a CFP?
Yes. And I say it is because you've got snow falling in Notre Dame. You've got a fantastic matchup in Tennessee and Ohio State that you're not capped on Saturday night. Let's face it, we could go back and we could say Alabama should be in there with this team or that team or this team or that. And we could go back but when it's all said and done, as a guy who has dreamed of this to come along for my entire fandom of college football, which would be 30 years or 40 years, I'm sorry, it's finally here. So your thoughts on, is this all you could have hoped for in a college football playoff? Does it feel like a realization of something?
Well, I wrote I was the Grinch yesterday when you were out, Dave, and I talked about how if you look at the ticket prices, I think the NCAA was short-sighted because the ticket prices are plummeting for 3 of the 4 college football playoff games. Because what they didn't take into account is, yes, it may be all people hope for in terms of viewership and watching at home, but nobody really wants to go to these games. And
well, it's gonna have a Super Bowl feel before long. I covered one Super Bowl, and the auxiliary seating was in the stands, so you sat essentially in the stands with your press box seating, but it was so antiseptic, I guess is the word. It was all corporate guys. There was no cheering. I don't think I saw one pair of hands clapped. So I think that's what the college football playoff is going to feel like eventually, because you also have all of these individual players. I'm sorry, these individual schools that are looking for their best option as well. The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. Today's tough question. I'm sorry, what the H? They tried to get Nico suspended for the season. Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones. Listen, Josh Heupel's done a lot of things besides recruit Nico Iamaleava to Tennessee, and he's done a lot of them at a high level. But still, if not for Nico, where is his program and what he brings to not only as a player, but as a tangible recruiting asset? And I can't help but think, Caleb, that Josh Heupel's career is going to go as Nico's goes as well. So you're talking about a point in time where the NCAA wanted to end that relationship before it even started.
Oh, yes. Josh Heupel went for Nico the way, Dave, you've covered NFL teams and franchises, and sometimes coaches, you know this, there will be coaches who are effectively the GMs, and they will leverage their entire future taking over a franchise on one quarterback that they want in the draft. And it's like, you can do that, but your future is inextricably tied to that quarterback at that point. I believe, and maybe you could tell me, but Andy Reid did that with Donovan McNabb, right? He took a risk on Donovan McNabb, and
a little bit ahead of my time. I mean, I remember him, but I don't remember the specifics of where he was drafted. No, but Donovan McNabb was a very good player. And so I would think I don't even remember where he got drafted, Caleb.
It was like 17th, and Eagles fans in typical Eagles fashion didn't want him, so they booed. But the reason I bring that up is like, yeah, Josh Heupel's inextricably tied his future to Nico Iamaleava. And I think that he still believes in him. We all still believe in him. It took him a little bit longer to get going than we thought, but he's playing well now. I just think that when you really break this down, and someone asked the question on the message board, why did they go after Florida, Florida State, and Tennessee specifically? Well, I'll give you the reasons they went after all three of them. One, Florida embarrassed themselves because they lied about an NIL collective they had and were promising NIL money they couldn't pay out on the recruiting trail. So they were an easy target. Florida State, I think Florida State was an easy target because Florida State was trying to get out of the ACC. They were doing their best to cause some chaos in college football. And honestly, the NCAA went harder after them after the Sugar Bowl last year, where Florida State showed up all of college football by not having any of their players show up for the Sugar Bowl and just losing that game on purpose because they were mad about being left out of the playoff. And they went after Tennessee because Tennessee was a wounded dog, and the NCAA needed to flex their muscle somehow, and they smelled blood when they saw Tennessee. And so that's the reason they went after all three. Now, you bring up something. You talked about lining their own pockets, Dave. 3 days ago, we talked about Brian Kelly matching NIL funds. I'm sure you heard yesterday about Alabama Athletic Director Greg Byrne sending out a message asking fans for money. Did you see that?
Yes.
Here's where I think people are worried about the chaos that this is creating. This is all going to work itself out. You want to know the logical end of all this? The only answer? Eventually, the money, the administrators and the power people, from the athletic directors to the commissioners, are just going to, within 20 years, are just going to have to be accepting that they're going to make less money. They're fighting tooth and nail to avoid that. But the truth is, there's a finite amount of money going around, and they collected all of that money in the past, but now the players are getting some of that pie. So they're trying to supplement the players getting that pie by asking for the donations. That's not going to make up for the amount of money the players are commanding. Eventually, this is just going to end with the administrators, the useless administrators, not stealing millions of dollars the way they have been.
So you're not talking about coaches. You're talking about all the associate ADs that run around on campuses.
Associate ADs, yeah, associate commissioners. I mean, there's the conference commissioners, but how many people below the conference commissioners are there that probably just collect checks, that sit in a board and do nothing?
Oh, at each school?
No, I mean at each conference.
Oh,
like Like, how many people are how many people are in the SEC probably have offices where they collect like $500,000 to just do nothing but send 2 emails a day?
Probably 3 or 4. Probably a good number of those guys.
Yeah.
Probably a good number of those guys. But that's what Dave Hart was hired for when he came to Tennessee, and he cleaned everybody out. He just didn't understand the lady ball thing. So I think they're in much better shape than they are right now.